I always told my followers that monsters don't care about fear. They feed on what people ignore. Belief, doubt, attention, it's all fuel. That's why I built this channel. Cryptid Debunking with Finn. I strip away rumor, mystery, and hysteria with facts, logic, and a good dose of humor. I've got 50,000 subscribers now. Every week when I explain the latest tall walker scare away, the number jumps. The more panic spreads, the more eyeballs tune in, and the more unsettled I feel. Tonight's episode should have been easy. I'd polished the footage, annotated the maps, cross-referenced local reports. At 7:30 p.m. I queued it for upload at 8:47 p.m., the same slot I never miss. My schedule's a ritual now, precise like a church bell. Behind me, a wolf's skull poster watched with hollow eyes, catching the glare of my monitor's glow. My desk cluttered with notebooks, cables, and half-drunk mugs. I rubbed my eyes. The metallic taste lingered again, sharper than usual, like biting into cold copper, bitter enough to catch at the back of my throat. I stared at the blinking recording icon. The ring light hummed. My fingers tapped the desk, but my jaw clenched like I'd bitten something invisible. The alert came exactly as I clicked Start Stream. A high-pitched chirp ripped through the room, serrated and sharp as wire scraping concrete. My chest locked up. A banner burst across the screen, red letters against black, glitching at the edges. Emergency alert. Mass abductions reported in Cedar Falls. Residents advised to remain indoors. Do not investigate tall figures. Belief is protection. This is not a drill. The last line stared at me like a dare. I laughed softly, more to mask the thud in my chest than anything else. Classic hysteria, I muttered to the webcam. People lose their dogs, panic spreads. Next thing you know, monster sightings everywhere. But the chat exploded. At Lyle_Nash, it's outside my window watching. At Zara Kemp, every time you say it's fake, it grows. At AnonGuest 234, count slowly, confuse it. The messages flashed in and out like static bursts. I scrolled frantically, blank. Gone. My pulse hammered. I forced myself to grin. Relax, I said. Let's get into this. The edges of the screen rippled. Not a huge distortion, just a heat wave shimmer bending pixels at the frame's borders. The cursor jittered. The ring light flickered once, then steadied. But the air felt heavier, as if I'd leaned into a damp wall. I glanced at the chat again. More warnings scrolled by. At Lyle_Nash, it's in the dark. At Zara Kemp, never livestream after dark. At AnonGuest 234, don't correct them, contradiction feeds it. I tried to highlight one message to respond, but before my fingers reached the trackpad, the text rearranged itself. Don't answer. The cursor blinked beneath it like a slow, accusing eye. I swallowed hard. The smell hit next, ozone. Sharp, electric, curling into my sinuses like a spark catching damp fabric. My throat tightened, taste metallic and acrid, curling around my tongue with the insistence of a warning. I grabbed a tissue and wiped my lips, but the bitterness only deepened. A shiver crawled down my spine. All right, I said into the mic, forcing brightness into my voice. Let's break this down. I dove into the footage anyway. Cornfield misreads, sleep deprivation, drones mistaken for creatures. I explained the science layer by layer, pointing out how panic amplifies the imagination. But the chat pulsed again, as if the messages preloaded before being sent. At Lyle_Nash, it's counting. At Zara Kemp, never livestream after dark. At AnonGuest 234, don't contradict. I typed stay safe, but as my fingers hovered above the keyboard, the message rearranged itself without my touch. Stay. Quiet. The blinking cursor waited patiently, daring me. My reflection in the monitor's border shifted. For a fraction of a second, my eyes blinked a beat too late. I jerked back, heart racing, breath catching like I'd inhaled cold dust. I spun toward the window. Blackness. Nothing. When I turned back, the screen edges rippled harder, as if the surface tension of reality bent and pulled toward the inside. The knock came next. 3 slow, deliberate taps against the window. Dry hollow. My spine locked. My fingertips dug into the desk as the cold crawled from neck to shoulder blades. I froze. The chat box flashed again, more lines than before. At Lyle_Nash, count to 30 before answering. At Zara Kemp, it loses interest if you wait. At AnonGuest 234, don't contradict, contradiction feeds it. At Unknown, it's behind you. I scrolled. Nothing. My breath hitched. I wanted to close the window, to stand up, to ignore it, but another message popped up. At Lyle_Nash, it knows when you're watching. The hair on my arms bristled. I glanced at the clock, 8:51 p.m. My pulse pounded in my ears like static. My reflection lagged again. For the briefest frame, I saw something lean in behind me, thin, impossibly tall, its shoulders like jagged angles. I spun around. Nothing. The chat exploded one last time. At Anon-Guest 234, count slowly. At Zarakemp, don't contradict. At Lyle_Nash, it's counting. Then silence. My fingers hovered above the keyboard like foreign limbs. I looked back at the monitor. My face stared pale and hollow-eyed. My jaw clenched as if fighting something inside my skull. "Folks," I whispered. My throat rasped. This might be something. The ring light dimmed once more, throwing the room's corners into uneven shadows. Dust motes spun like tiny eyes suspended in stale air. Static hissed through the speakers, a low, distorted vibration that seemed to hum just beneath hearing. The waveform in the corner jumped once, twice, then flattened. A second alert tone cut through the stream's feed. Not system-generated, but embedded, garbled by layers of distortion. Do not investigate. Belief. Protection. Not a drill. The waveform pulsed erratically again before collapsing into silence. My stomach twisted into knots. The bitter metallic taste deepened. My breath rasped against dry lips like sandpaper. The knocks came again. 3 slow taps. The window remained shut. The sound pressed inward. I wanted to look away. I wanted to close the stream. But somewhere beneath the logic, something colder whispered that turning off the camera wouldn't turn off what had already begun. I typed one more message, "Stay aware." The words formed cleanly. I hovered over send. Then the message rearranged itself once more. "Stay. Quiet." The blinking cursor pulsed like an eye, waiting for me to choose. The knocks didn't stop. 3 slow taps against the window frame. Then silence. Then 3 more, harder, as if the wood itself strained under invisible fingers. My breath caught in my throat. The chat flooded again, too fast, too precise. At Lyle_Nash, count to 30 before answering. At Zarakemp, it loses interest. At Anon-Guest 234, don't contradict. Contradiction feeds it. I typed, "It's nothing." Sleep deprivation. But before I could hit send, the keys froze beneath my fingers. My fingertips tingled uselessly. The words rearranged themselves without permission. "It's watching." The blinking cursor waited beneath it like a pulse. My mouth flooded with that copper taste again, thick, metallic, curling at the back of my tongue. I spat into the tissue beside the keyboard, but the bitterness only deepened, spreading like liquid rust through every syllable I tried to form. The reflection in the monitor staggered once more. My eyes blinked a fraction late. My lips twitched toward a smile I never gave. For a fraction of a frame, something tall hovered behind me, shoulders jagged like bent branches, head cocked at an impossible angle. I spun around. Nothing. Just a window pressed with darkness like ink settling in water. I froze. For a second, I remembered another stream, maybe 2 months ago. The same format. The same distorted alert banner. I couldn't place it exactly, but the memory's edges quivered at the back of my mind, as if this had happened before. I shook my head, telling myself it was stress. The chat scrolled again. This time faster, more chaotic, messages flashing in patterns that didn't make sense. At Lyle_Nash, don't look. At Zarakemp, it feeds on watching. At Anon-Guest 234, you've already helped it. The last line slammed into me harder than the knocks. I shoved the keyboard aside, fingers trembling. I covered my eyes, pressing hard against them as if darkness could shield me from what I didn't want to see. My breath rasped in and out like sandpaper. Sweat slicked my palms, but something rooted me. Some instinct, ancient and useless, kept me from standing, from shutting everything off. I forced myself to peek through one eye. The screen had changed. My live feed cut out entirely. Static crawled across the frame like boiling water trapped beneath glass. Bits of white hissed and jittered in restless waves. The screen's corners pulsed like slow lightning flashes. Then the banner appeared, twisted, glitched, half erased, but screaming all the same. Emergency update. Entity responds to disbelief. Maintain neutral thoughts. Do not deny its existence. Skepticism feeds the harvest. The words shredded across the screen, pixel by pixel. I rubbed my eyes, but the letters clung to the corners like barnacles on metal. The mouse pointer jerked toward the end stream button, hovering uselessly. I should have cut it off, but I didn't. I leaned closer. A sharp ozone scent ripped through the room. It rose from the desk's edge into my sinuses like a swarm of electric insects. I coughed, but the bitterness only thickened, curling over my tongue like burnt wire insulation. My jaw twitched. I wiped sweat from my brow, but the moisture clung like a film that wouldn't evaporate. The window rattled. 3 knocks again. Harder this time. Dust trembled along the sill. Fine grains lifted from the frame like insects fleeing vibration. My skin crawled. The chat pulsed again, messages flashing in fragments. At Lyle_Nash, don't answer. The cursor blinked beneath it like a waiting eye. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms until pain steadied my breath. My head throbbed in time with the hum from the speakers. A voice, distorted, crawled through the audio feed, not part of any broadcast I recognized. Do not deny its existence. Skepticism feeds the harvest. Belief is protection. This is not a drill. The waveform jittered erratically, spiking and collapsing like broken heartbeats. My stomach flipped. Another knock slammed the window. 3 rapid blows that rattled the glass like bones clashing. I thought of cutting the stream, but another thought dragged harder. There were thousands watching. They'd be sharing screenshots, forwarding warnings, laughing at the glitch, or worse, arguing in comments, spreading doubt like static through copper wires. If I cut the feed, would I stop it, or drive it deeper into their devices? I sat frozen. The chat scrolled once more. At Lyle_Nash, count. 30. Now. The blinking cursor pulsed like a heartbeat. I closed my eyes, counting slowly. 1, 2, 3. The knock stopped. But the silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It hummed, like thousands of whispers trapped behind walls, like dust vibrating in unseen currents, like static seeping through cloth fibers into skin. I cracked one eye open. The monitor's glass shimmered like water catching moonlight. My reflection smiled, not in joy, but in something far worse. Anticipation. Hunger. A knowing that had waited for me all along. The knocks didn't stop. 3 sharp blows rattled the window like knuckles tapping bone. Then silence. Then 3 more, harder this time, making the glass shudder in its frame. Dust lifted from the sill, swirling in the pale halo of the desk lamp, as if the vibration itself dislodged it. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. The chat exploded again, too fast, too perfect. At Lyle_Nash, count to 30 before answering. At Zarakemp, it loses interest. At Anon-Guest 234, don't contradict. Contradiction feeds it. I typed, it's nothing. Sleep deprivation. But before I could hit send, the keyboard froze under my fingertips. A buzzing electric tremor crawled up my wrist like ants, paralyzing my hand. The words rearranged themselves without permission. It's watching. The blinking cursor below it pulsed like a living heart. My tongue tasted copper again, thick, bitter, clinging to the back of my throat like blood pooled on rusted steel. I spat into the tissue beside me, but the bitterness only spread, crawling across my tongue like frostbite. The reflection in the screen staggered once more. My eyes blinked a fraction late. My lips twitched toward a smile I never gave. For a heartbeat, something tall loomed behind me, shoulders twisted like bent branches, head cocked at an unnatural angle. I spun around. Nothing but the window. Darkness pressed against the glass like ink bleeding across paper. I froze. The silence gnawed at me, but beneath it was another noise, a faint whisper of thousands watching, eyes burning through screens. I could almost hear them breathing. My fingers shook. Somewhere deep in my mind, another memory stirred, another stream, another alert, another smile warped by static. It was just out of reach, like a nightmare half remembered, but familiar enough to send a chill down my spine. The chat scrolled again, faster, chaotic. At Lyle_Nash, don't look. At Zarakemp, it feeds on watching. At Anon-Guest 234, you've already helped it. The last line slammed into me like a fist. I shoved the keyboard aside, palms slick with sweat. I covered my eyes with both hands. My breath hitched, rasping like sandpaper across dry wood. I wanted to stand, to unplug the stream, to run, but something colder, harder than willpower, gripped me like iron fingers pinning me to the chair. I stayed. I forced one eye open. The screen had changed. My live feed cut out entirely. Static crawled across the frame like boiling water trapped beneath glass. The edges jittered like fine grains of sand caught in a whirlpool. The corners flashed with pale bursts like distant lightning. Then the banner reappeared, glitched, half erased, words tearing themselves apart mid-scroll, but screaming all the same. Emergency update. Entity responds to belief and doubt alike. Do not share. Do not argue. This is not a test. The font shimmered as if frost crept inward from every corner. It belonged to no known system. I hovered the mouse pointer over it, but it jittered like an insect trying to escape, refusing to click. I rubbed my eyes until they watered, but the letters clung like barnacles on steel. For a breathless moment, they rearranged themselves. Emergency alert. You helped it. You watched. You spoke. You counted. Now it knows. The screen went black for half a second before returning. My stomach knotted like cold rope twisting tighter and tighter. I should have cut the feed. But I didn't. Thousands of eyes, thousands of phones, all waiting for fragments of this madness to spread like sparks racing across dry grass. If I cut the stream, would it trap itself in my room, or scatter into every device tuned in? I couldn't stop thinking about them, watching, sharing, arguing, feeding it as surely as any monster feeds on flesh. The knocks slammed harder now, 3 blows that rattled the glass until it trembled like a struck drum. Dust flew from the frame in slow clouds, spinning in the air like startled moths. I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles blanched. The smell hit like a fist, ozone sharp as burning wire insulation, curling upward from the desk like smoke rising from a live circuit. I gagged. The bitter taste flooded my mouth, spreading across my tongue like frostbite. My jaw twitched involuntarily, clenching around nothing. Stop, I whispered, but the word broke like dry twigs snapping in wind. A new alert tore through the speakers. The entire room flashed white, then fell to blackness, then flooded with scrambled text that crawled like worms across the screen. Emergency alert. Reports of disappearances have surged. Do not stream. Do not speak. Do not believe. Belief gives it teeth. This is not a test. The words snapped like brittle twigs. The speakers stretched vowels into growls. Each syllable trembled like a predator's breath. I shut my eyes and counted. 1, 2, 3. I forced my breath steady. 4, 5, 6. The knocks slammed harder with each count, vibrating the glass until it tickled the fine hairs on my arms. I could feel the resonance traveling up my wrists into my shoulders. 7, 8, 9. The static noise screamed into my ears, a high, grating whine that shredded thought, drowning the room. 10, 11, 12. My vision blurred. The walls seemed to lean inward, like soft wax melting toward a flame. 13, 14, 15. The copper taste returned, spreading like iron filings ground into my gums. 16, 17, 18. My fingers twitched against the desk, as if counting themselves despite my effort to still them. 19, 20, 21. My heart hammered in time with the hum from the speakers. 22, 23, 24. The reflection's eyes widened grotesquely. The smile stretched too far, baring teeth sharpened like a predator's. 25, 26, 27. The knocks exploded against the glass, 3 vicious blows that rattled the frame until fine cracks spiderwebbed outward like lightning. 28, 29, 30. I opened my eyes. The monitor's glass shimmered like rippling water. My reflection grinned, not with joy but with something hungrier. Its teeth gleamed unnaturally sharp. Its eyes swallowed light, as if waiting to tear through me. The chat scrolled one final time. At Lyle_Nash, don't answer. At Zara Kemp, don't contradict. At AnonGuest 234, you've already helped it. The cursor blinked beneath the last line like a waiting mouth. My throat locked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the screen apart. But something colder, darker, gripped my chest and pinned me in place, as if iron hands had wrapped around me from behind. I didn't move. The knocks didn't stop. 3 sharp blows rattled the window pane like bone tapping glass. Then silence. Then 3 more, harder, urgent, like claws scratching at the frame. Dust burst from the sill in little clouds, spinning in the desk lamp's halo like startled insects. My chest tightened so hard it felt like iron bands clamped around it. The chat burst alive again, too fast, too precise. At Lyle_Nash, count to 30 before answering. At Zara Kemp, it loses interest. At AnonGuest 234, don't contradict. Contradiction feeds it. I typed, it's nothing. Sleep deprivation. But my fingers froze before the message could send. A prickling, electric tremor ran up my arm like cold ants skittering over skin. The words rearranged themselves without warning. It's watching. The blinking cursor below it pulsed like a heartbeat. My mouth flooded with copper again, thick, bitter, clinging to the back of my throat like blood smeared on rusted steel. I spat into the tissue beside the keyboard, But the taste remained, crawling along my tongue like iron filings grinding into raw flesh. The reflection in the screen staggered once more. My eyes blinked a fraction late. My lips twitched toward a smile I never gave. For one sickening instant, something tall loomed behind me, shoulders bent like broken branches, head tilted unnaturally as if listening. I spun around. The window's glass stared back at me, pressed with darkness like ink slowly spreading through water. I froze. The silence pressed inward, suffocating. Beneath it, another sound, faint at first, swelled like whispers layered on top of whispers. I imagined thousands of eyes burning through screens, waiting for my next move. My fingers shook. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a half-forgotten memory flashed. Another alert, another broken broadcast from months ago. I couldn't quite place it, but its edges shimmered at the back of my mind like a dream dissolving at dawn. The chat scrolled again, faster, more frenzied. At Lila_Nash, don't look. At Zara Kemp, it feeds on watching. At AnonGuest 234, you've already helped it. The last line slammed into me like a fist. I shoved the keyboard aside. My palms were slick with sweat, trembling like wet leaves. I covered my eyes with both hands, willing darkness to block it out. I wanted to stand, to rip the plug from the wall, to run. But something colder, harder than willpower, gripped me like iron fingers pinning me to the chair. I couldn't move. I forced one eye open. The screen had changed. My live feed had vanished. Static crawled across the frame like water boiling under ice. The corners jittered, grains of sand swirling in a whirlpool. Pale bursts flashed like distant lightning. Then the banner reappeared, distorted, glitching, tearing itself apart mid-scroll, but screaming nonetheless. Emergency update. Entity responds to belief and doubt alike. Do not share. Do not argue. This is not a test. The font's edges burned white before fading back into gray, as if the alert itself inhaled. I hovered the mouse over it, but the pointer jittered like an insect trapped under glass, refusing to click. I rubbed my eyes until tears blurred the screen, but the letters clung like barnacles on metal. For a breathless second, they rearranged. Emergency alert. You helped it. You watched. You spoke. You counted. Now it knows. The screen went black for half a second before snapping back to life. My stomach knotted like rope tightening around my guts. I should have cut the stream, but I didn't. I could almost feel the others, thousands watching, scrolling, arguing. I imagined comments pouring in like rivulets feeding a river. Some laughing at the glitch, others posting warnings, others dismissing it. Each word, each reaction, a breath the predator could feed on. I bit the inside of my cheek until blood welled, grounding myself. Images crashed through me. Maps dotted with red where I'd mocked past sightings, journal pages warning how disbelief shattered old protections, comments from viewers laughing at disappearances, faces dissolving into static. It all swirled together like shards of glass whirling in a storm. I opened my eyes. The reflection grinned wider. It leaned in, distorting until its jaw stretched toward me like black tendrils reaching past the screen's edge. Its teeth gleamed sharper than before, eager to bite through glass. A thin, metallic hum surged through the speakers, rising higher, sharper, more abrasive. It scraped against my eardrums, drilling into my skull like splinters of ice. My skin crawled. The air thickened, acrid and electric, crawling into my nose like a swarm of metallic insects. My breath rasped like dry leaves brushing stone. Stop, I whispered, but the word cracked like a twig in a firestorm. A new alert burst through the speakers. The room flashed white, plunged into black, then flooded with broken text crawling like worms. Emergency alert. Reports of disappearances have surged. Do not stream. Do not speak. Do not believe. Belief gives it teeth. This is not a test. The words snapped like brittle branches underfoot. The distorted audio stretched vowels into growls that sounded almost alive. Each syllable pulsed like breath too hot, too close. I shut my eyes and began to count. 1, 2, 3. My breath hitched, rasping like sand dragged across stone. 4, 5, 6. The knock slammed harder, rattling the glass until dust trembled off the frame like startled moths. 7, 8, 9. The static noise screamed into my ears, shredding thought until it drowned me entirely. 10, 11, 12. The walls seemed to lean inward like wax melting over a candle's heat. 13, 14, 15. The copper taste flooded my mouth, sharp as ground wire filling raw gums. 16, 17, 18. My fingers twitched uncontrollably, counting against my will. 19, 20, 21. My heartbeat matched the speaker's pulsing hum. 22, 23, 24. The reflection's eyes widened grotesquely. Its smile stretched like jaws pried open with iron rods. 25, 26, 27. The knocks exploded. 3 blows that rattled the window until fine cracks spiderwebbed outward. 28, 29, 30. I opened my eyes. The monitor's surface shimmered like a sheet of disturbed water. My reflection grinned with a hunger too wide, too sharp. Its teeth gleamed like serrated blades. Black tendrils licked the edges of its jaw, as if reaching to pull itself out. The final message scrolled one last time. At Lila_Nash, don't speak. At Zara Kemp, don't contradict. At Anon-Guest 234, you've already helped it. The cursor blinked beneath the last line like a waiting mouth. My throat locked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the desk. But something darker gripped my chest and pinned me like iron. I didn't move. The screen's reflection didn't blink when I did. I sat frozen, pulse thudding in my ears louder than the high-pitched static crawling through the speakers. The tendrils of shadow licked the edges of the reflection's grin, curling like wet fingers stretching toward me. I could feel their pull, not visually, but in the way my skin tightened, every hair rising like static in a storm. I tried to breathe, but the air was thick with ozone. It clawed into my nostrils, burning like wire insulation frayed and live. The metallic taste returned, stronger this time, crawling down my throat like frostbite melting into muscle. My jaw trembled so violently that the muscles spasmed uncontrollably. I clenched my fists until the nails bit into my palms, anchoring me, but the pressure under my skin only grew. The alert banner returned, this time longer, jagged, its edges flickering like torn paper caught in wind. Emergency alert. Continued participation will result in memory erasure. Protect others by ignoring yourself. Belief and doubt are both hunger. Speak and it grows. Remember and it multiplies. This is not a test. The words scrolled erratically. Some froze mid-letter, others doubled, stacked, crawling across one another like insects trying to swarm the screen. The font pulsed white then faded as if breathing. I could hear the hum vibrating the desk beneath my fingers. The desk wasn't solid anymore. It thrummed like the skin of something alive, barely contained. My fingertips tingled, hair standing on end. I flinched. The chat window flooded once more. At Zara Kemp, don't speak. At Lila_Nash, don't contradict. At Anon-Guest 234, you've already helped it. At new user, it's watching you count. The final line froze, blinking like a heart waiting for a pulse. I shut my eyes tight. I could almost hear the viewers scrolling comments in real time. Faces lit by their phones flashed in my mind's eye. Some laughing, others confused, some posting warnings, others dismissing them outright. I imagined them sharing screenshots with hashtags, #glitchalert, #staycalm, #ignore it, each share like a drop of fuel feeding the fire. A hollow dread hollowed my chest. I bit the inside of my cheek until blood welled, anchoring myself in pain. But it didn't stop the surge crawling along my nerves. I thought of every past stream, my smug smile, my explanations, my rational dismantling of fear. I could see timestamps glowing red next to reports of vanishings, towns erased from maps one by one. I traced them with a numb thumb, eyes widening as the pattern locked into place. A voice in my head whispered, "Haven't I seen this before?" The edges of another night shimmered at the back of my mind, a distorted alert, the same glitching grin. A memory half buried, dissolving like mist, but familiar enough to send ice through my veins. I whispered, "No," but the word sounded foreign in my throat, dry, cracked, metallic. The reflection's grin stretched wider, curling at the corners until it seemed ready to spill over the edges of the screen. Shadow tendrils thickened, coiling like snakes, licking toward me with impossible reach. For one horrifying moment, I could almost feel them brush the glass, tickling, probing. I slammed my palms against the desk to shake myself back, but the vibration only deepened, as if the desk's hollow core thrummed in sync with my terror. The alert changed again, jagged lines racing across it like worms tunneling through static. Final warning, silence or serve. Belief and doubt are both hunger. Speak and it grows. Remember and it multiplies. This is not a test. The words warped mid-sentence, doubling, glitching like corrupted files trying to escape deletion. For a breathless second, final warning stretched into final warning, 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 until it looped endlessly. I swallowed hard. The copper taste thickened, curling like ice shards lodged in my throat. A new line scrolled at the bottom. One I hadn't typed, appearing letter by letter. Count. Slow, or it eats you. The blinking cursor below it pulsed like a heartbeat too rapid to follow. The tendrils thickened further, their edges darker, more defined, shadows curling into claws, curling to pry through the screen. I bit my lip until blood filled my mouth. I swallowed it, and the metallic taste surged, flooding my mouth like rusted iron filings dissolved in saliva. The static crescendoed, grinding against my ears, compressing my skull until it felt like bone would split. I shut my eyes and began to count. 1, 2, 3. My muscles spasmed with each breath, claws of static crawling under skin. 4, 5, 6. The knock slammed harder, rattling the glass until dust trembled off the frame like startled moths. 7, 8, 9. The static noise screamed into my ears, shredding thought until it drowned me entirely. 10, 11, 12. The wall seemed to lean inward like wax melting over a candle's heat. 13, 14, 15. The copper taste flooded my mouth, sharp as ground wire filling raw gums. 16, 17, 18. My fingers trembled, counting themselves against my will. 19, 20, 21. My heartbeat matched the speaker's pulsing hum. 22, 23, 24. The reflection's grin widened grotesquely, teeth lengthening, twisting unnaturally. Its eyes darkened to pools that seemed to draw light from the screen. 25, 26, 27. The knocks exploded, 3 blows that rattled the window until fine cracks spiderwebbed outward. 28, 29, 30. I opened my eyes. The monitor's surface shimmered like a sheet of disturbed water. My reflection grinned with a hunger too wide, too sharp. Its teeth gleamed like serrated blades. Black tendrils thickened, licking the edges of its jaw as if trying to pry the glass apart. The corners of the screen pulsed like skin stretched tight over bone, and the shadows seemed to press against it like claws testing the barrier. For one terrifying instant, it felt as though it might break through. The chat scrolled one final time. At Lila_Nash, don't speak. At Zara Kemp, don't contradict. At AnonGuest 234, you've already helped it. At New User, it's watching you count. The cursor blinked beneath the last line like a waiting mouth ready to devour. My throat locked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the desk. But the cold grip tightened around my chest until I couldn't move. I didn't. I couldn't breathe. The glass wasn't glass anymore. Its edges pulsed like skin stretched too tight, veins of shadow writhing just beneath the surface, as if the screen itself had a heartbeat. The tendrils licked outward, curling like wet claws against the boundary, pressing but never breaking through, yet. The grin stretched wider than any face should. Teeth flashed sharp as razors, each edge gleaming like bone cut clean and polished. It wasn't a smile anymore, it was a promise. The air burned with ozone. It clawed into my nostrils like shards of shattered wire insulation. Every breath rasped against my throat, metallic, bitter, tasting of blood, rust, and stale circuits. My jaw spasmed, clenching so hard my teeth ground against one another with a sickening crack. I swallowed, and the copper flood spread faster, curling into my sinuses, coating my tongue, crawling down my throat like liquid ice. My stomach flipped, twisting itself into knots until I nearly gagged. The alert banner splintered, glitching with each pulse of static until its letters crawled like insects. The sound distorted into long, drawn-out growls. Emergency alert. Remember, and you feed it. Speak, and you starve yourself. Silence or serve. This is not a test. The words looped, half erased, stacking atop one another like corpses in a grave. The edges flickered white, then black, then white again, as if the message itself breathed. I could hear the hum vibrating the desk beneath my fingers. The desk wasn't solid anymore. It thrummed like the skin of something alive, barely contained. My fingertips tingled, hair standing on end. I flinched. The chat window flooded once more. At Zara Kemp, don't speak. At Lila_Nash, don't contradict. At AnonGuest 234, you've already helped it. At New User, it's watching you count. The final line froze, blinking like a heart waiting for a pulse. I shut my eyes tight. I could almost hear the viewers scrolling comments in real time. Faces lit by their phones flashed in my mind's eye. Some laughing, others confused, some posting warnings, others dismissing them outright. I imagined them sharing screenshots with hashtags, #glitchalert, #staycalm, #ignore it, each share like a drop of fuel feeding the fire. Among them, I glimpsed my own face, grinning from a previous stream. Static riddled, eyes wide with mock reassurance. Another me frozen mid-smile. For a terrifying moment, I thought it leaned forward like the others, watching me hungry. A hollow dread hollowed my chest. I bit the inside of my cheek until blood welled, anchoring myself in pain. But it didn't stop the surge crawling along my nerves. I thought of every past stream, my smug smile, my explanations, my rational dismantling of fear. I could see timestamps glowing red next to reports of vanishings, towns erased from maps one by one. I traced them with a numb thumb, eyes widening as the pattern locked into place. A voice in my head whispered, "Haven't I seen this before?" The edges of another night shimmered at the back of my mind, a distorted alert, the same glitching grin. Another version of me, a loop I'd already fallen into. My stomach twisted. I whispered, "No," but the word sounded foreign in my throat, dry, cracked, metallic. The reflection's grin stretched wider, curling at the corners until it seemed ready to spill over the edges of the screen. Shadow tendrils thickened, coiling like snakes, licking toward me with impossible reach. For one horrifying moment, I could almost feel them brush the glass, tickling, probing. I slammed my palms against the desk to shake myself back, but the vibration only deepened, as if the desk's hollow core thrummed in sync with my terror. A new alert crawled in at the bottom, one letter at a time, jagged as broken glass. "Count slow. Count slow. Count slow." The cursor below blinked like an eye waiting. The tendrils thickened further. They pressed harder against the screen, their shadowy tips flattening like tongues, probing for warmth. A thin whisper slithered out from the speakers, barely audible. "Count slow." It tickled the edge of my ear, soft as breath against skin. The edges of the monitor quivered. Shadows coiled tighter around the grin like vines choking a tree. I bit my lip until blood filled my mouth. I swallowed it, and the metallic taste surged, flooding my mouth like rusted iron filings dissolved in saliva. The static crescendoed, grinding against my ears, compressing my skull until it felt like bone would split. I shut my eyes and began to count. 1, 2, 3. Each breath burned. 4, 5, 6. The knocks slammed harder, rattling the glass until dust trembled off the frame like startled moths. 7, 8, 9. The vibration climbed up my arms, crawling along my nerves like ice worms burrowing under skin. 10, 11, 12. The edges of the monitor quivered. Shadows coiled tighter around the grin like vines choking a tree. 13, 14, 15. The copper taste sharpened into knives, biting at the back of my tongue like shattered metal filings grinding into bone. 16, 17, 18. My throat spasmed. I could feel the static scraping against the inside of my skull, like claws raking over the membrane of thought. 19, 20, 21. The reflection's grin split wider, curving past its own limits. Teeth seemed to ripple like liquid metal, sliding over one another in unnatural patterns. 22, 23, 24. The tendrils thickened again. Their edges blackened, curling into hooks that scratched the glass, sending tremors through the frame that tickled my skin like frozen fingers. 25, 26, 27. Dust burst from the window, suspended in air like motes of charred paper. 28, 29, 30. I opened my eyes. The screen stretched toward me, edges warped, corners thick with shadow. The tendrils pressed flat against the surface, licking, testing, whispering like a mouth seeking flesh. The grin widened until it seemed to spill over the glass's edge, thick with wet hunger. For one suffocating second, the boundary between reflection and room blurred. I could see shapes behind the grin, hundreds of faces twisting in static, mouths opening, eyes burning. Some laughed, some whispered, some screamed soundlessly. At Lilanderskarnash, don't speak. At Zara Kemp, don't contradict. At Anon Guest 234, you've already helped it. At New User, it's counting with you. The final line froze, blinking like an eye waiting to tear the world apart. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the desk, but the cold grip tightened around my chest until I couldn't move. I didn't. The silence wasn't empty, it was packed. The hum from the speakers pulsed against my bones, grinding low like teeth scraping bone. The air felt thick, clotted with ozone and something worse, something metallic, stale, as if the room itself were bleeding iron. My nostrils burned with each breath. I tried to inhale slow, shallow, but the air rasped like sand dragged over glass. The screen wasn't glass anymore. Its edges pulsed like skin stretched too tight, veins of shadow writhing beneath the surface, as if something inside it breathed. Thick cords of darkness flexed and licked outward, curling like wet claws, testing for weakness. The grin stretched wider than any face should. Teeth flashed sharp as razors, glistening like bone cut clean and polished. It wasn't a smile, it was a promise. The alert banner, barely legible, distorted across the bottom in crawling lines of corrupted code, half-eaten by static. Emergency alert, breach imminent. Count slow. Do not speak. Do not remember. Breach imminent. This is not a test. The letters twisted and split, as if the warning itself couldn't contain its urgency. I wanted to turn the stream off. I wanted to scream. But the iron grip around my chest tightened, curling like cold claws. I couldn't move. A new message scrolled jagged and sharp. Your hesitation feeds it. The words blinked twice and vanished, replaced by another line. You're already part of it. The final blink lingered like a dead eye watching. My fingers twitched on the desk, nails digging into flesh. The metallic taste thickened until it coated my tongue like sludge. It crawled down the back of my throat in slow coils, numbing, choking. I gagged but couldn't force it out. My eyes burned. I rubbed them, but the edges of the screen shimmered in slow ripples, as if the glass breathed. I forced myself to breathe. Slow. Steady. But every breath dragged against that metallic rasp like wire being scraped raw. The knocks began. 3 blows. Pause. 3 blows. Pause. Each strike shattered dust loose from the frame in miniature storms. It floated in lamplight like ash, particles spiraling in eddies before settling like soot. The first time I froze. The second time I flinched. The third time, I nearly bolted but couldn't move. I knew somehow that moving fed it. I knew my fear, my flesh, my breath were bait. I knew silence was safer, but suffocating. The screen pulsed again. This time the grin distorted further. Its teeth split, lengthened, shifted like glass shards sliding across metal. Black tendrils thickened at the edges, curling inward like claws testing for weakness. Its eyes darkened into pits that drank the light from the room, leaving everything else hollowed. For one frozen second, I saw faces in the distortion. Not watchers, not viewers. My own face. Grinning. Twisted. Half dissolved by static. A million versions of me, each locked mid-expression, each warped, each hungry. The image warped further, slipping between frames, half-glimpsed, broken by interference. I blinked hard, but it returned, crawling closer. Stop, I whispered. The word cracked like dry twigs. My throat convulsed. The static screamed louder. Another alert scrolled from top to bottom, inverted, distorted, jagged. Emergency alert. Continued delay invites breach. Count slow or be devour. Do not speak. Do not remember. Do not resist. This is not a test. The words tore apart mid-sentence, letters doubling and folding like dead insects pressed into glass. I swallowed. My tongue scraped against teeth like metal filings. The copper taste surged, thicker than ever, clinging to the roof of my mouth, crawling along my gums like ants burrowing in dark soil. My eyes watered. Tears streaked down my face but couldn't drown the vision. The tendrils on the screen's edge twitched, flexed like muscle fibers under skin. I pressed my hands flat against the desk to ground myself, but the vibration thrummed through bone like an unseen heartbeat. I could feel its breath through the glass. Cold. Wet. Hungry. A thin whisper slithered out from the speakers, barely audible. Count slow. It tickled the edge of my ear, soft as breath against skin. I jerked my head, but there was nothing. The same whisper echoed again, this time layered, as if many versions of my own voice were breathing it from different corners. Count slow. Count slow. I froze. The memory flooded me. Hadn't I streamed this before? The same glitching grin. The same cold breath. The same impossibility. I couldn't remember the exact night, but the pattern burned into my mind like a scar. Hadn't I been here already? Wasn't this moment repeating? Another me trapped in this loop. A million versions of me staring at the same screen. The screen pulsed again. This time, another alert crawled in jagged white letters against black static. Forget yourself. It didn't flash. It didn't scroll. It crawled into my skull like worms twisting under skin. I froze. My heart hammered. My mouth flooded. My jaw spasmed until I bit the inside of my cheek. Warm blood swelled on my tongue. Images spiraled. Flashbacks of streams, past alerts, faces from memory, all twisted together into an impossible collage. I squeezed my eyes shut. I could hear the viewers again. Not whispers now, not messages, but fragments of my own voice from other streams, arguing, mocking, laughing, desperate to reassure viewers that it was fake. A million echoes, a million lies. The tendrils pressed harder. The grin split wider. The room seemed to shrink inward. And I, frozen, breathless, tasting metal and memory and fear, knew the breach was coming. It broke, not with a crack or burst, no explosion of shattered glass, but like skin stretched too thin and folding inward, soft, wet, pliable. The monitor's edges rippled, dark veins swelling like muscle beneath the surface. The grin expanded again, wider, thicker, more alive, and the tendrils pressed forward as if tasting the air through the glass. The screen's heartbeat pulsed faster. The vibration seeped into the desk, into my fingertips, up my forearms like frostbite racing along nerves. My eyes locked on it. I couldn't look away. The message scrolled jagged and slow across the top. Emergency alert, breach imminent. Do not speak. Do not remember. Forget yourself or be taken. This is not a test. The words twisted mid-sentence. Letters slid over one another like insects piling up in a dark nest. Static crawled through the speaker wires like ants. The cold surged again. A pulse, then another. It began at the tips of my fingers, numb needles that bit deep, spiraled around bone, then shot toward my chest like ice shards melting into muscle. I swallowed. The copper taste flooded my mouth, thick and sharp as crushed wire filings ground into raw gums. My jaw spasmed until I bit the inside of my cheek, and hot blood spilled across my tongue. I gagged but couldn't force it out. The room smelled of burnt circuits and wet stone. The tendrils pressed harder. They weren't shapes anymore, just elongated masses of black fluid glistening with sharp edges, curling toward me like tongues probing for warmth. I covered my ears, but the sound only grew louder. A million whispers rose in layers, some urgent, some mocking, some pleading. Count slow. Forget yourself. Do it. Help us. My own voice echoed back, twisted, arguing with itself. I know this is fake. I've seen it before. It's not real. It's always real. The sound looped and overlapped until the edges blurred, as if my thoughts were being shredded, fed back to me from thousands of watchers. My eyes flicked toward the chat window. The comments scrolled faster than I could read, words piling over each other. At AnonGuest 234, count slow. At Lila_Nash, forget yourself. At Zarakemp, you're already it. At new user, don't speak. It's listening. More usernames flashed and vanished too quickly to catch. My skin crawled. Then, one line froze and lingered longer than the others. At EchoFin, it's always real. Finn, it's always real. My stomach clenched. It was me. A ghost comment from another stream, or another version of me locked in another time, whispering this exact warning. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. I slammed both hands against the desk, desperate to ground myself, but the vibration deepened, crawling into bone. The wood felt soft beneath my palms, quivering like muscle. I could feel it through the grain, through the fibers, like the desk itself breathed. My breath hitched. The metallic rasp in my throat sharpened until each inhale scraped against raw nerves. I coughed, but the taste didn't shift. It clung like rusted iron dust coating my tongue and gums. The screen rippled again. The grin split like a seam, curving inward toward me, as if about to crawl out. I could see it breathe. Each expansion and contraction of its maw synced with the pulsing alert, as if feeding off the words themselves. I forced myself to count. 1. The numbers stuck to my tongue like ice. 2. My lips trembled. 3. The cold pulsed harder, like frost spreading through veins. 4. Dust spiraled off the window in slow storms. 5. The room's hum rose to a scream in my ears. 6. My jaw spasmed. I bit deeper until blood welled again. 7. The tendrils flexed like muscle fibers, curling tighter around the screen's edge. 8. Static crackled like claws scraping bone. 9. The whispering voices merged into a chorus of despair. 10. The grin split wider, the darkness behind it thickening into wet muscle. I forced myself forward. 11. 12. My eyes watered uncontrollably. 13. 14. The cold pulse reached my chest, numbing breath and heart alike. 15. A new alert crawled from the bottom, jagged and broken. Forget yourself. It didn't scroll. It seeped into the air like vapor, curling into the edges of the room. 16. 17. I could hear someone, or something, whispering from inside my own mind. Do it. Forget. Feed us. 18. 19. 20. My breath hitched again. The metallic taste thickened until I nearly choked. 21. The tendrils flexed toward me like wet fingers pressing against skin. 22. A pulse ran up my wrist, icy and deliberate, coiling around bone like frostbite seeking warmth. 23. I wanted to resist, but my muscles wouldn't answer. 24. 25. The grin stretched toward me, its teeth glinting like knives sliding over flesh. 26. 27. The desk pulsed beneath my hands like skin's surface exposed to frost. 28. 29. 30. The alerts vanished. The sound dropped out. The hum turned into silence. The grin split open. The darkness reached toward me. It was inside me before I knew it. The grin split wide, but it didn't just creep toward the screen's edge. It seeped through it, a wet black tide flowing past pixels and wires, folding into air thick with ozone. I could feel it sliding across the desk, a cold slickness coating the wood like skin breathing. My fingertips prickled. The vibration intensified, now a steady hum that burrowed through muscle and bone until it felt as if my skeleton throbbed in sync with the screen's pulsing dark. My eyes locked on it. I couldn't look away. The message scrolled jagged and slow across the top. Emergency alert, breach complete. Your memory is hunger. Speak and starve. Forget and feed. This is not a test. The words didn't merely flash. They oozed across the glass like ink dissolving into water, thickening into black veins that reached toward me. My eyes widened. I forced a breath in. The metallic rasp shredded it apart. The copper taste coated every surface of my mouth. It crawled along my gums, filling the cracks between my teeth like rusted filings. I gagged but couldn't force it out. The smell, worse now, reeked of burnt circuitry and wet stone, sharp and raw like a wound left open to air. The tendrils pressed against my skin. Cold surged up my forearms, racing like frozen fingers, curling around bone and sliding toward my neck. It spread like ice worms burrowing deep into muscle fibers, wrapping around nerves and locking joints. The desk beneath my palms pulsed as if flesh, each tremor crawling deeper until it felt like bone would split. I tried to pull back, but my hands were locked in place. A final alert crawled across the screen in long, jagged letters that stretched and doubled as they pulsed. Emergency alert, memory is hunger. Speak and starve. Forget and feed. This is not a test. The words twisted mid-sentence. Letters slid over one another like insects piling up in a dark nest. Static crawled through the speaker wires like ants. The cold surged again. A pulse, then another. It began at the tips of my fingers, numb needles that bit deep, spiraled around bone, then shot toward my chest like ice shards melting into muscle. I swallowed. The copper taste flooded my mouth, thick and sharp as crushed wire filings ground into raw gums. My jaw spasmed until I bit the inside of my cheek, and hot blood spilled across my tongue. I gagged but couldn't force it out. The room smelled of burnt circuits and wet stone. The tendrils pressed harder. They weren't shapes anymore, just elongated masses of black fluid glistening with sharp edges, curling toward me like tongues probing for warmth. I covered my ears, but the sound only grew louder. A million whispers rose in layers, some urgent, some mocking, some pleading. Count slow. Forget yourself. Do it. Help us. My own voice echoed back, twisted, arguing with itself. I know this is fake. I've seen it before. It's not real. It's always real. The sound looped and overlapped until the edges blurred, as if my thoughts were being shredded, fed back to me from thousands of watchers. The chat window scrolled again. At AnonGuest 234, count slow. At Lyle_Nash, forget yourself. At Zarakemp, you're already it. At EchoFin, it's always real, Finn always real, always real. At new user, don't speak. It's hungry. The last line blinked like a mouth waiting to devour me. My skin crawled. Then one hallucination slammed through me. The room's walls dissolved into faces. Hundreds, thousands, all staring, all silent at first. Then their mouths moved together, a grotesque choir of whispers, their lips shaped like mine. Feed us. Forget yourself. Count slow. Help us. Their eyes burned like coals behind dark sockets. I screamed inside, but no sound escaped. I clawed at memory. Faces spun. Names fell. Events splintered. The grin split wider. Its edges curled like claws. Its teeth gleamed like serrated blades, dripping with wet blackness. Its eyes darkened into hollow pits that seemed to drink every ounce of light from the room, leaving me suspended in a void. A thought ripped through me, brief, unbearable. This isn't new. I've died here before. I've been here before. I've been trapped here before. It slammed into my mind like a fist, echoing with memories I couldn't piece together. The grin's breath slid across my neck, cold and wet. It snaked up my arms, deeper into muscle fibers, curling around tendons and locking joints. My shoulder froze. A pulse raced up my wrist, icy fingers threading between bones, numbing nerve endings until each fiber screamed. My eyes watered. I bit deeper into my cheek. Blood filled my mouth. The copper taste thickened until it coated my tongue and gums, a metallic sludge I couldn't spit out. The alerts blurred again. The final message crawled across the bottom of the screen. Forget yourself. It didn't scroll. It seeped into the room's corners like vapor, curling around the edges of objects, crawling along the ceiling beams. The grin lunged. The desk trembled. The cold climbed higher. I wanted to fight. I wanted to live. But my muscles wouldn't answer. The grin's hollow eyes devoured the light. The faces in the room whispered together. Feed us. Forget yourself. Count slow. Help us. And I fell. I couldn't tell where I ended. The edges of my skin blurred like charcoal rubbed across wet paper. My hands lay limp on the desk, fingers pale, waxy, as if drained of life. Cold, thick and deliberate, crept along my veins like frostworms, curling around tendons and locking joints, freezing muscle memory from within. My breath came shallow. Each inhale rasped like metal filings dragged across bone. My chest spasmed, but air wouldn't fill my lungs. I could only gasp, shallow bursts that tore through nerve endings like splintered glass. The grin stretched wider. Its teeth weren't just blades. They shifted like wet glass sliding over wet glass, sharpening as they slid toward me. I could see black slime glistening along their edges, thick and deliberate, crawling toward the emptiness between them as if tasting the space it would soon devour. The final alert scrolled again in agonizing jagged lines. Emergency alert. Forget yourself. Feed or starve. This is not a test. The letters pulsed in sync with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell if it was my chest hammering or the screen's dark rhythm consuming me. I forced a breath in. The metallic rasp shredded it apart. The copper taste coated every surface of my mouth. It crawled along my gums and filled every crack between my teeth like rusted dust packed deep into bone. I gagged but couldn't spit it out. The smell was worse than before, rotted circuits, scorched plastic, wet stone, and something far older, something like blood turned to iron and left to rot. The tendrils pressed harder. Cold surged through my forearms like a living thing, snaking under skin, curling into nerve endings. It locked muscles individually, freezing each fiber with slow precision, as if it knew exactly where to paralyze me. I tried to pull back, but my hands were dead weight on the desk. The chat window scrolled faster. At Anon-Guest 234, feed it. At Lila_Nash, forget yourself. At Zarakemp, you're already it. At EchoFin, it's always real. Fin always real, always real. At New User, don't speak. It's hungry. The final message froze. At EchoFin, it's always real. Fin always real, always real. It lingered, blinking like a mouth waiting to devour me. My eyes darted across the faces on the screen. They weren't viewers. They were me. Hundreds of me. Frozen mid-expression, some grinning, some terrified, some blank with numb terror. Their mouths moved together now, in unison. A chorus of whispers poured out, shaping broken syllables that mimicked slogans I had shouted on earlier streams. It's fake. Nothing's happening. I've seen it before. It's always real. The whispers rose in volume. The mouth stretched wider. The hollow eyes of the grin devoured the room's light, sucking warmth into the abyss until the corners of my vision dissolved into darkness. A thought stabbed me. This isn't new. I've died here before. I've lived this night before. I've been trapped here again and again. The realization slammed into my skull like a hammer cracking stone. The grin lunged. Its edges curled like claws, probing for weakness. Its breath grazed my cheek, cold and wet, searching for warmth. I tried to scream. No sound. Only the copper flood thickened in my mouth, coating my tongue and gums like sludge. I bit deeper into my cheek until hot blood welled and spilled, mixing with the metallic sludge. I gagged. The desk beneath me pulsed like living flesh. Dust spiraled from the window, hanging in the air like ash that refused to settle. The cold snaked up my wrist, curling around each bone, locking them one by one. My shoulder froze. My elbow locked. My fingers stiffened. The frostworm pulse crawled toward my neck, snaking past muscle fibers, shredding nerve endings with each tiny advance. My eyes watered uncontrollably. I forced them open. The faces in the room multiplied. Hundreds of mouths forming slogans, overlapping like broken records. Feed us. Forget yourself. Count slow. Help. Always real. The grin's hollow eyes darkened into pits of emptiness. Light vanished. I clawed at memory. Faces blurred. Names melted. Thoughts crumbled into fragments. The room's edges dissolved. The desk rippled like skin ready to tear open. The final alert scrolled one last time in agonizing slow motion. Emergency alert. Forget yourself. Feed or starve. This is not a test. The letters twisted into writhing shapes, dissolving into darkness. For one fleeting breath, I fought. I clawed at memory, at faces, warnings, rituals, even the sensation of warmth. But everything slid away. I heard the whisper again, closer now. Forget. Feed. Be free. I clenched my jaw. Muscles spasmed uncontrollably. I bit deeper into my cheek. Blood spilled down my chin. The copper taste thickened until it coated my tongue like molten iron poured into soft clay. I gagged. My body wouldn't react. The grin lunged. The desk trembled. The cold consumed my chest like ice melting into bone. I wanted to fight. I wanted to live. But the words crashed through me like a wave. Forget yourself. Memory tore apart. Faces dissolved. Names warped. Thoughts scattered into meaningless noise. The grin's breath pressed against my cheek again. I surrendered. The darkness swallowed the last of the light, and I vanished. I woke before I knew I had slept. Not from comfort, not from safety, from pressure, from absence. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Darkness swallowed the corners of the room, thick and heavy like wet cloth. The ceiling above me pulsed with a slow, sick rhythm, soft and wet, like skin stretched too tight, ready to burst. My mouth was raw. The metallic flood returned instantly. Copper, sharp and sour, coated my tongue and gums like powdered iron stuck in cracks between teeth. I swallowed, and pain shredded through every nerve as if metal filings ground against raw bone. I bit my cheek until blood spilled down my chin, mixing with saliva into a thick sludge I couldn't spit out. The smell hit me next. Burnt circuitry, scorched plastic, wet stone left open to rot. It clung to the sheets, to the desk, even to the edges of my skin, as if the room itself breathed decay. The emergency alert tone pulsed softly from the speaker, insistent and unnatural, like a heartbeat humming through bone. Emergency alert. Memory is hunger. Feed or starve. This is not a test. The words crawled across the screen's edge in broken fragments. Letters stretched, doubled, dissolved into shapes that slithered like insects across glass, hungry for warmth. The desk trembled beneath my palms. Its grain, once coarse and solid, quivered like living flesh. I pressed my hands flat, and the vibration crawled into my muscles, snaking along tendons and searching for weakness. A tendril of cold slid along my wrist. Thin, precise, unrelenting. It burrowed into muscle fibers, splitting them apart with ice-sharp claws, curling around joints until each seemed frozen from within. I jerked my hands back. They trembled, but the cold lingered, crawling deeper, patient. The room's edges blurred. The lamp's glow stretched into liquid pools that lapped at surfaces like shadows learning to breathe. Shapes appeared at the edges of vision. Hundreds, thousands. Mouths twisted, gaping, distorted. Some grinned, some blank with dread, some horrified. Their faces weren't strangers. They were mine, twisted versions of me, grinning smugly, blank with fear. Some half-morphed, lips trembling with familiar phrases. They lunged toward one another and mouthed words I'd screamed in past streams. It's fake. Nothing's happening. I've seen it before. It's always real. The whispers overlapped, rising like broken glass rattling in a tin can. My head throbbed. I clawed at memory, but it slipped like ash between fingers. The desk's pulse deepened, sending shocks into my muscles. Dust spiraled from the window, suspended like ash, refusing to settle. I closed my eyes. Behind my lids, shapes swam. Faces twisted. Mouths shaped words in unison. Feed us. Forget yourself. Always real. Count slow. The whispers layered until they became a roar, drowning out my thoughts. I clamped my jaw shut. The metallic taste thickened, filling every crack of my mouth, clinging to tongue and gums like molten rust poured into soft clay. I gagged. My body refused to react. The desk's tremor burrowed deeper. The cold snaked past skin, curling into nerve endings like frostbite clawing for warmth. It shredded muscle fibers with sharp precision, racing through smaller muscles until each screamed in agony. I tried to scream. No sound came. Only breath rasped like metal scraping bone. The emergency alert flickered again. Emergency alert. If you speak, you starve. If you forget, you feed. This is not a test. The message lingered, letters stretching toward me, wanting to crawl off the screen, smear across the desk, seep into my skin. I forced my eyes open. The faces returned, but now they twisted grotesquely. Their mouths gaped impossibly wide. Their eyes bulged. Their expressions melted into the same contorted mask, my face. Hundreds of them. My mouth stretched into grins both smug and manic. My eyes glazed with terror. Each mouthed slogans I'd screamed into cameras, distorted beyond recognition. It's fake. Nothing's happening. I've seen it before. It's always real. Their whispers fused into a chorus. The grin on the screen flashed for a fraction of a second, its jagged teeth gleaming like blades poised to tear flesh, before dissolving back into static. But I knew it was there, waiting, watching. I forced myself to breathe. The rasp tore through raw nerves coated in copper. Each inhale shredded what remained of resistance. A thought stabbed through me. This darkness. It's always the same. Always. I've woken to this before. I've always woken here. The memory slammed into my skull like iron plates cracking against bone. The desk trembled again. The cold raced up my arm. It curled tighter around muscles. It slithered deeper, shredding nerve endings with icy teeth. My shoulder spasmed. My wrist locked. My fingers stiffened. The pulse burrowed into my neck, racing along tendons, clawing at every nerve. I clenched my jaw again. But pain spiked, slicing through muscle, making it twitch uncontrollably. The faces leaned closer. Their mouths whispered in unison. Feed us. Forget yourself. Always real. Count slow. The desk's pulse became a roar. The light stretched further. The edges of the room folded inward like wet paper collapsing over bone. The cold's grip deepened. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I bit my cheek one last time. Blood spilled down my chin, hot and metallic. The copper flood thickened until it drowned out the rasp of breath. The faces swarmed. The whispers merged. The grin split wider. Its hollow eyes devoured every beam of light. And I fell once more into the cold. The dark didn't end. It thickened. It pooled. It rose like smoke from the corners of the room, pressing against me until every nerve screamed. I lay frozen, limbs numb, breath rasping against metal filings stuck in my throat. My mouth tasted like blood soaked in iron, thick, suffocating. Every swallow dragged rust through muscle fibers already shredded by cold claws. I bit my cheek until the flesh split and hot blood welled down my chin, mixing with saliva into a sludge I couldn't spit out. The stench hit me next. Burnt circuitry. Scorched plastic. Ozone thick as rot. Wet stone left open to decay. It clung to the sheets, to the desk, to the folds of my skin, as if the room itself breathed corruption. The emergency alert crackled softly from the speaker, insistent, unnatural, like a predator's heartbeat humming through bone. Emergency alert. Memory is hunger. Feed or starve. This is not a test. The scrolling letters stretched, jittered, frayed until they slithered like insects across glass. Their edges broke apart, dissolving into symbols that crawled toward me, eager to sink into skin and mind. The desk quivered beneath my palms, not solid, not grainy, but soft and wet, breathing like flesh. The vibrations burrowed deep into muscle, snaking along tendons, testing for weakness. A thin tendril of cold slithered along my wrist. It wasn't a wave, it was a needle. It slid beneath skin, curling into nerve endings like frostbite hunting warmth. It shredded muscle fibers with microscopic teeth, then locked joints one by one until each screamed with unbearable agony. I jerked back, but paralysis lingered. The room's edges blurred. The lamp's glow twisted, bending into pools of liquid light that lapped at corners like shadows learning to breathe. Shapes stirred at the edges of my vision. Hundreds. Thousands. Mouths warped, gaping too wide, eyes too deep, teeth too sharp. Their faces weren't strangers. They were mine. Twisted copies, grinning smugly, eyes glazed with madness, some contorted into monstrous parodies of fear and obsession. They surged toward one another, lips shaping phrases I'd screamed in earlier streams. It's fake. Nothing's happening. I've seen it before. It's always real. The whispers overlapped like shards of glass rattling in a jar, louder until they fused into a roar that drowned my thoughts. I clawed at memory. For a flash I saw it, my face framed by a camera's ring light, eyes wild with panic as I shouted, "It's always real. They're watching." The image twisted, melting into the grotesque mouths now hovering before me. I screamed inside, but silence answered. I forced my eyes open. They were everywhere. Not only copies, mimics. They shaped my catchphrases perfectly. My jaw clenching, my eyes glazing, my lips trembling with old desperation. Their mouths moved in eerie synchrony, spitting back words I barely remembered speaking. "Feed us. Forget yourself. Always real. Count slow. Help us." Their eyes devoured me. The lamp's soft glow flickered. Light bent like liquid pooling at edges, crawling toward me like hungry fingers. The stench thickened, suffocating, sticking to every surface. The desk pulsed harder, sending vibrations through bone-deep marrow, forcing muscles to quiver against my will. The static crackled again. "Emergency alert. Remain still. Speaking starves you. Forgetting feeds you. This is not a test." The message crawled, letters stretching toward me like claws desperate to burrow into flesh. I forced myself to breathe. The rasp tore through nerves raw as wire, coated in copper dust. I clenched my jaw. The cold responded instantly, coiling tighter, locking joints in brutal precision. Its claws shredded muscles fiber by fiber, racing through nerve endings until each screamed in agony. The desk's pulse deepened. The light dimmed. The screen's edges darkened. A flash of the grin split across the glass. Wet, razor-sharp teeth gleaming like obsidian blades ready to tear flesh apart, before vanishing back into static. But I knew it watched. Waiting. It always watches. A thought struck me. Not random. Not new. Always the same. I've woken here before. Always. The darkness never ends. The voices never stop. The cold never releases. The desk's pulse never ceases. The faces always wear mine. The loop never ends. The realization slammed into my skull like iron plates crushing bone. The tendril raced up my arm faster. It curled around joints, shredding nerves like claws twisting in soft tissue. Each muscle fiber screamed. Each bone locked tighter. My shoulder spasmed. My wrist froze. My fingers stiffened. The pulse crawled up my spine, racing toward my scalp like frostbite hunting warmth. I clamped my jaw shut. But pain spiked, slicing through flesh until muscles spasmed uncontrollably. The watchers leaned closer. Their mouths stretched impossibly wide. Their voices layered over one another until syllables shattered, forming a chorus of madness. The desk's pulse roared louder. The lamp's glow thinned. The screen's edge darkened further. The emergency alert scrolled once more, crawling upward like claws desperate to reach me. Emergency alert, forget. Feed. Obey. This is not a test. The letters stretched, sharp, ravenous, long fingers reaching toward my skin. I swallowed blood. The copper flood coated my tongue, and gums like molten rust poured into raw wounds. I gagged. The cold's claws shredded nerve endings, ripping them apart one by one as ice chased warmth deeper into muscle. A fleeting thought stabbed me. I've always woken to this darkness. Always trapped. Always erased. The grin split wider again, hollow eyes devouring every last glimmer of light. The whispers screamed in unison. Forget yourself. Feed. Always real. The walls folded inward like wet paper collapsing over bone. The desk pulsed like skin ready to tear open. My muscles spasmed. My breath rasped. The copper taste thickened until it drowned out every sound. And I vanished.